Thank you guys for tuning in to Saints in Society. I'm Rick Reeves, your host today, here with co-host and our guest, Brad Libolt. And today we're going to be talking through Pornography Part 1 in a two-part series. And specifically, we're going to be talking about how the gospel frees us and empowers us to walk forward into relationships in honesty and in confession. So we're excited to have you tune in today.
You are listening to Saints in Society, a podcast focusing on equipping saints to live in and engage with their society. As we dive into the Word and with help from experts in their field, we seek to learn how to engage culture in its terms, but not on them. We believe the gospel speaks to all of life and provides the answers we are all looking for, so we aim to equip saints with the tools necessary to apply the gospel to all areas of life, living as saints in society.
All right, Brad, every day for the rest of your life, you can only watch one movie. You have to watch the movie every day, and it's the only movie you'll ever be able to watch again. What movie are you choosing?
Either, I guess I have to choose one. Here's the two I'm thinking of. Either Gladiator, because it's great, it's awesome, and it would inspire me to seek vengeance every single day of my life, which is good.
Okay. What's your
Number
other one?
2, Hot Rod.
Hot Rod?
Yeah. Love me some Andy Samberg.
Okay.
The jokes in that movie do not get old. It's really stupid humor, but it's like between that or Dumb and Dumber for a comedy for some laughter every day. But I think I'd laugh at Hot Rod every day.
Okay.
What about you?
The Last Samurai.
Ooh.
It's one of my favorite movies. There's a little bit of humor in it. Not enough for me, but it's still good movie with some inspiration in it, some good fighting and all that stuff. So yeah, that's one.
How long is it? It's gotta be long.
Yeah, I think it's a couple hours, but it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Okay.
Yeah,
favorite movies of all time.
There's a great narrative of grace in the movie, which
you went a little way deeper and more serious than I did.
I will unpack that at a later time. So
okay. That would be a great podcast, is the theology of film, and we just do movie reviews.
Oh yeah, on a bunch of different movies.
Put it on the storyboard or the vision board.
Go ahead and add that one, Zach. Hey, this morning we're going to talk on Saints in Society about a topic that has come up a lot inside of our local church family, but it's just been very prevalent in culture, and that's pornography. And not only are we talking about this, and we're not talking about it just from a theoretical position or something that we just know facts about it, but I also get to be today's host and talk to you, Brad, and this has been something that has been a part of your story as well. And so I'm excited for us to dive in to this. My honest prayer and hope for this is that God would use this in men and women's lives to help them come out of darkness and into light. Because as you know, and I know, we've seen so many people that have battled with this and struggled with this in secret, that have done that for years and seen the damage that it's caused to them, to relationships, to marriages, to families, and on down the line and stuff. So I'm excited to talk about this. I'm going to turn it over to you and even just ask this first. Where do we start on a subject like pornography? Where's the first place we go to? What's the first thing that we should talk through? What's the first thing that we should address? And maybe specifically to why is it such a big deal now? Has it always been a big deal? Why are we seeing more and more men come out with this? Is it only a male struggle? Do women struggle with this? Like, how is culture influencing this? Is it getting worse? So those are some of the questions I have for you.
Sure. Like you said, this is a relevant topic. It's also a very sensitive one. So I think at first where we start is hopefully with a lot of grace and humility, but also with like courage to wade into something that's really difficult. And like it stirs up a lot of emotions. For a long time, if I was listening to Christian podcasts that I really liked and they do an episode on pornography, I would skip that one because I didn't want to. So I hope people don't skip this one. But there's like that sense of, I don't want to hear, about this because it's personal. So yeah, there's that. I think we need to talk about it because of, like you said, it's coming up in the church, but I would say that the way that it or as much as it comes up in the church, is like scratching the surface of the depth of the problem in our culture, but in the world as well. And part of that is because of how pornography has changed and developed over time, and how accessible it is. It's affordable, like free.
Mm-hmm.
And it's aggressive. So there's one book I read talks about the 3 A's of the internet: accessible, affordable, and aggressive. So it's in front of us everywhere. So you think to, like, I don't know what your, like, your generation, but it wasn't that long ago that first exposure to pornography was like your dad's stack of Playboy magazines.
Mm-hmm.
And accessing any kind of pornographic material, you had to either stumble upon something like that, or you had to go to like an adult store and rent a video.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that wasn't that long ago. But now we have, so like my generation, the internet was like, when I was born, the internet was also being born. And with that came a new kind of pornography that was just far more accessible. And so
you weren't able to be as sneaky. So
Right.
if you wanted something that was pornographic years ago, you had to walk into a store and ask for a magazine, or purchase a magazine, or walk into a store, which had to have face-to-face interaction, because there was also no self-checkouts for a while. And so like you had to walk to a store with something in your hand, see another human face-to-face. So we've removed human interaction and have even become more sneaky about it.
Exactly. Yeah. And sneaky because we have the internet in our pocket. We have phones and tablets and iPods and just internet, and there's free Wi-Fi everywhere. So like access to the internet is available to most people in most places at most ages. And so it's you don't have to have that face-to-face interaction. It's literally a click away. So now you have, I read an article that talked about the biggest problems facing men and women entering ministry in like this next generation of like 20-something-year-olds that are going into the ministry. The number one problem that this seminary professor identified was the problem of pornography, because for the first time we have a generation of 20-something-year-olds that the internet has always been a thing, the iPhone has always been a thing, and so exposure to pornography is just prevalent. So to go away from the church for a second, and in culture, this is the other big thing. It's no longer taboo. Pornography used to be kind of like this shameful taboo, like, it was like this dirty thing. There's obviously it is still that, but in culture's view of it has changed to where it's acceptable. It's expected that you're looking at pornography, male, female, whatever it is. I think the average age of initial exposure to pornography is between 11 and 13 years old. There's other studies that would indicate the age might even be sooner, like 8 years old. And so, it's people are being exposed to it at a very young age, and then they're growing up in a world where, just like sexually explicit content in movies and TV shows. I mean, do you remember like a PG-13 movie would never say the F word, like kissing was as far, and then it's like now PG-13 is like F words are being dropped, and like the sexual content of movies, it's just we've just keep moving.
The bar keeps getting lower and lower. Yeah.
And so with it around the world, with it around us in the world, and with it so accessible in our pocket, you're not gonna. It's gonna be very rare to find someone ages 11 to probably like 30 that has not had some kind of exposure to pornography, and I would say it even goes beyond that. So there's statistics that are shocking. Well, not shocking. There's statistics that are sobering. What is it like? Is it 90% of men or?
Yeah.
High percentages of men have ever looked at pornography, and then high percentages of men look, once a month, and high percentage of men look several times a week. So, and the statistics of women are increasing as well. And so it's not just a guy problem, it's a male and female problem.
Yeah.
And then in the church, I don't think the statistics aren't that different, and any difference there might be, I don't think is because people in the church aren't looking, it's because they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
You've said that there was a statistic through COVID, I think, of 50-something% of pastors admitting to looking at pornography, which is the pastors that chose to be honest. You know? And
yeah.
so like,
and if it's that high, then
then there's probably more. So it's not something that is talked about a lot in the church. And so there's probably a lot of hiding, and statistics are probably not as accurate as what the reality is.
I want to say this, but not create a bunch of marital problems.
Okay.
And so help me out here.
Yeah.
So one of our elders says that he goes into every conversation with the male, assuming this man is struggling to some degree with a pornography addiction.
Okay. Yeah.
With that, is it safe to say, because this is what's commonly happened and what I've heard is we're doing this, and even some women are listening and probably going, well, I just don't think that's my husband. Is it unfair to use the F word there? Is it unfair or is it going to create a lot of marital unhealth for women to assume that their husband is in that percentile? Like, should they be going into the conversation with their husband, asking questions or assuming that? Can you speak to that and how maybe they could do that in a gracious way? But it seems like the consistent theme across the board is every time something comes out, the woman is like, I didn't see the signs, or like, I didn't think it would be my husband, or I didn't think this would be my situation, and stuff like that. So to our elders' position, he goes into every conversation with the male, assuming that he struggles with that. Is that a healthy thing to do in the context of marriage?
Probably depends on what you do with that assumption. If you assume quietly and then become skeptical and don't ever say anything to your husband, that's not healthy. But if in a loving, I think genuinely, like with a genuine desire to help, approach your husband and say, hey, this is a bigger thing than maybe I thought it was. Can we have an honest conversation about what your struggle has been like with this? And then it's on, I think, the husband to be honest. And so, yeah, I do think, I think it's good for a wife to assume the best in her husband, but I think it's also healthy to be realistic and to recognize the prevalence of this problem. Well,
and to what you just said, because we do have to merge these passages together. So 1 Corinthians 13 is, in a summary, we could say it's that love is going to assume the best intentions out of my brother or sister in Christ, right? But there's also that we're called to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Yeah. And so there is some wisdom. If this is such a big thing in culture, if it is shoved in the faces of men and women all around, I mean, every pop-up ad, just about everything has some level of like sexual content to it, then it seems like there at least needs to be some working position that maybe my spouse is someone who struggles with this. Maybe going into the conversation saying, I want to remind you who you are in Christ. You're a child of God. Nothing can change that. But in light of that, can we have a really honest conversation about this?
Yeah, for sure.
So,
yeah. I'll maybe share a little bit of my story.
That'd be helpful
with that. Because it wasn't until I think I started hearing that message of who I was in Christ and my identity that I felt comfortable being honest. So let me back up. I was exposed to pornography at a young age. I don't think I was as young as that 11 and 13-year-old range, but it was close. Middle school, high school, or early high school, something like that. Don't remember the first time or anything like that. But I remember the age, the curiosity, the shame, the like weird excitement, but then also the like, I know this isn't something that I should be doing, but then I also can't stop doing it and that kind of thing. And so eventually decided to tell my youth pastor at the time about my struggle looking at pornography, and was met with grace and thanks for sharing, that kind of stuff, which I think is good. And I don't remember what kind of plan was put into place to help. Usually the plan is, hey, if you feel tempted, text me kind of thing. I think we put some kind of content blocker on my iPod, which those things are great. We can talk about those later. There's ways around them if you want it. So the talk with the youth pastor about it was good, but didn't really change the problem. So through high school, continued to struggle with looking at pornography. Into college, got involved with the college ministry, where I was able to be honest with sin in the context of a small group with guys, kind of similar responses. And the further in you go with an addiction to pornography, the harder it is to be fully honest, because you don't want to, you would hate for people to know the depth of like what's actually going on, because there's a lot of shame. And so it was easy to say things like, well, yeah, I struggle with lust, or, pray for me, I'm struggling with, lustful thoughts, or those kinds of things, when really there's like this porn addiction underneath the surface. And that was definitely me. And so shared with college pastor a time or two, and there's more help there with, let me have your iPad for a little bit and that kind of stuff. Started dating my now wife in college. Never told her about it through dating or engagement. And then I kind of had the thought, which I think most men do, that, once I get married, I'll get the real thing, and so this won't be a problem anymore, which turned out not to be the case. And so first year into marriage, it was still a struggle, and I didn't tell my wife about it. About a year in, I confessed to her partially that this was something that I struggle with. I need help. And so she had me tell some guys, and those guys were helpful. Again, responded with grace. Thanks for sharing. Put some accountability plans in place and stuff. And not too long after that, it started again. Nothing changed. And so it was back into this habitual pattern of pursuing pornography. And from that point on, it was complete secret, all hiding, not going to tell anyone. Also all along, so grew up in a Christian home. So there's shame involved with that. Like, you're this good Christian kid with this dark secret. Involved in youth group in high school, led some Bible studies and stuff. And so it's like, oh man, I'm in a leadership position, I can't do that. And then in college, became a small group leader for my peers, and then started working for the church out of college as like a middle school director, and then started going to seminary. So like, there's all these, like, the further along in life I went, the deeper into ministry responsibility and leadership positions I got, which also made it hard to be honest, because there's this greater pressure to be holy or, above reproach and those kinds of things. So a year into marriage, tell Jenna kind of starts up again. And then for 4 years, the next 4 years of marriage, hide it from her and everyone, and no one knows what's going on, but all the while struggling with porn addiction. Last year, so September of 2021, I got hired here at Gospel Community Church to be the executive pastor. And a month into me working here, decided, and there's a variety of reasons we could get into in another podcast of why I could say I think that I decided to confess to you, but we'll say right now, and I do believe it's the first reason, is God's grace and finally like awakening, my heart for the need of like coming clean at the risk of losing who knows what, So on a Tuesday, I think in October, I sat down with you in your office and confessed to you the full extent of the addiction. We went back to my house that afternoon and told Jenna. And so it was about 6 months ago. And so the last 6 months has been a process of difficulty and healing, a lot of grace and forgiveness from Jenna and people in my life, a lot of difficult conversations, a lot of tears. And yes, here we are 6 months post full confession, bringing it to light, and super thankful for community, thankful for my wife, and ultimately thankful for God's grace in covering my sin, and bringing about healing. And I would by no means say that I'm like have victory. I don't really like that language. We can talk about that too, but I don't have victory over this sin. I do. Jesus has victory over it because he's victorious, but I still struggle, like I still experience temptation and those kinds of things. So, so that's my story in light of what we were just talking about with wives asking their husbands. Men, husbands, please just be honest. On this episode's local business spotlight, we are highlighting Pacifik Coffee. Pacifik Coffee is a locally owned business. The beans are roasted here in town by the owner, Chris Johnson. Chris believes that at-home coffee should be affordable, easy to use, and still provide a moment of luxury on a busy day. And Pacifik Coffee is just that. I myself am not much of a coffee snob, and I really appreciate on every bag, it says the type of coffee you're making, how coarse the grind should be, how much coffee to use with water ratios, and how long to brew it. And for someone who doesn't know a lot about coffee, but still enjoys a cup every day, I find that really helpful. Something I really love about Chris and his business philosophy are the values that he has. Those values are family, community, and making a global impact. Chris has an awesome family who he wants to pass the values of hard work and entrepreneurship down to. And then he also values the community. He loves Eugene and Springfield and the surrounding area, and loves to make an impact in the community. Chris and Pacifik Coffee also values making a global impact. And so on their website, which is really well done, has a ton of information. Every bag of coffee that you can purchase on their website has a description of the region it comes from, the type of coffee that is grown in that region, what the farms are like there. And so he works really hard to get to know the farms that the coffee beans are coming from, and providing that information to his customers. So I would highly recommend you check out Pacifik Coffee. You can purchase it in a market of choice around town. You can also purchase it online on their website. Chris really appreciates his customers and the people that purchase the coffee. It's a locally owned business that does a really good job of making a quality product that's affordable and easy to use for people like you and me. So check out Pacifik Coffee. If you run into Chris around town, be sure and tell him that you heard about his business from Saints in Society.
A couple things that you said. Well, one, you're still in the thick of it.
Yes.
And so we're doing a podcast on this, not someone 10 years down the road from this, but someone, which I think is unique, but someone who's walking through it. And this wasn't like hey, Rick, I need to talk to you. This was, you were broken down. Your head was hung low and just crying. Like, I have an addiction. Like this is going on. Like this is this is a difficult season, and it has been, and you're still in it. Mm-hmm. One of the things you said during your story is that I think men oftentimes think, and I would say young single men, that once, and I've heard this, once I get in a relationship, I just don't think and there's something about, well, I'm in a relationship, and then once I get married, there's a season where where it's like things get better, but that doesn't mean it goes away. And so oftentimes what you find is these things kind of resurface and then come up again. Mm-hmm. And so with that, I feel like you are learning, like, hey, marriage didn't fix my problem.
Right.
It wasn't the ultimate solution that was going to heal what was going on inside of me. And I think sometimes people think that. So what have you learned about pornography in regard to, if marriage isn't going to solve it and it's not going to fix all of this stuff, like what have you learned? Like what is the solution? What are the things?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more like, what am I learning? I feel like you said, I'm still in the thick of it. First thing I would say, and so part of the process of like healing and recovery for me the last 6 months has been doing some counseling. And one of the first counseling sessions I had, I was told that pornography isn't the problem, it's the solution. That there's a different problem actually going on in my heart, in my life, that I'm going to pornography for the solution to, which was a really big perspective shift for me. And so okay, so what is that problem then? And I would like point to two different things that I'm learning about why I think I have had that struggle and why I think a lot of other people do. The first one is just our story and our childhood and upbringing. And so a lot of the counseling work that I've done has been exploring that story, family of origin. What was life like as a kid, as an adolescent, a teenager? What were relationships like with mom, dad, brother, friends, what girlfriends, that kind of thing. And in that, like, exploration of my story, what I've realized, I think I knew this, but didn't know how to like put words to it, is a lack of like emotional development, where as a kid, didn't really learn how to process emotions for a variety of reasons, but those emotions still happen. And so whether it's loneliness, felt lonely, didn't know what to do with that. And so like, I need to do something with it. And so you stuff it away for a little bit, or maybe you feel afraid, feel shame, feel guilt. these different emotions that come. It's part of the human experience. But what do we do with those? And if in not knowing how to healthily or in a healthy way process those emotions, eventually the weight of stuffing them down becomes too much. And so there needs to be some kind of outlet. And usually the outlet provides like the solution to the emotion. So say you're lonely, don't know what to do with that loneliness, go to pornography. Well, all of a sudden there's someone virtual on a screen that it's like pseudo intimacy, but that you have intimacy with. There's someone who approves of you, and it's all fake, right? But in your mind, you're thinking, okay, here's a place where I belong, a place where I'm affirmed, a place where I'm accepted. And then when it's over, you just feel even lonelier. Yeah. But you go back to, so whether it's loneliness or shame, shame is a big reason I think why men end up addicted to pornography. It's because you feel like there's something wrong with you. You want to go somewhere where you don't feel like there's something wrong with you, where you actually feel good about yourself. Pornography provides that.
A lot of your story is managing, masking, and covering shame.
Yes.
So, I mean, you were a 4-time soil judger in Christmas Valley.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a bit of a rock star there.
A bit.
But on a more serious level, it's like you got into all of these things that even externally look really good. Like you got into ministry and then you became, or you went to seminary. And so it's like you deal with, man, how do I cover up my shame? I can grow in knowledge. I can get a position that looks more spiritual. So it's like all of these things are ways that you can mask and cover and deal. And so men and women are doing something that struggle with shame to mask, to cover, or to cope with shame. And so a lot of your story shows that now that you can look back in hindsight and go, oh yeah, that's what I was doing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Everyone, because we live in a broken world, we all experience rejection and abandonment in some level. Intentional, unintentional, whatever, we're going to experience rejection and abandonment. That's going to lead to shame. Shame is like a feeling of there's something wrong with me. Like guilt is I made a mistake. Shame is I'm a mistake. Right. And so, okay, if I'm being rejected and abandoned, which is human experience in a broken and sinful world, there must be something wrong with me. So how do I fix that? Well, I either manipulate the relationships around me to make it so that people are okay with me, become codependent, or I say, forget everyone around me. I'm going to do my own thing. I become independent. I don't need their approval. So either way, you're running away from intimacy because you don't have true intimacy with the people you're in a relationship with, because you're just being whoever they want you to be so that they approve of you. And independence, you're running away from them. And then the pressure of managing those relationships becomes too great. And so then we go somewhere to relieve that pressure, which is pornography or alcohol or drugs or video games or working out, fitness, like all these things.
Success.
That make us feel okay when internally it's just shame because we think there's something wrong with us. And then pornography is, I think, especially unique because it only amplifies the feeling of shame. It's like you go to that place to solve the problem, and it just creates the problem, more of a problem, because you feel even more shame after you've done the thing that you went to try to solve the shame, if that makes sense. So so I think a lot of like uncovering our story, our family of origin, painful moments in our past, and how we responded and dealt with those leads to and like it's like a cliche that men aren't emotional and don't know how to deal with their emotions. You've said that has been a part of your story. That's a part of my story. I think most men don't know how to handle or deal with emotions because of who knows what. Well, there's, we have, again, another podcast. There's plenty of reasons. And so, but we still have them. So what do we do with them? Well, we stuff them away, deal with them poorly, and then go somewhere to ease the pain. And that's the accessible, affordable, and like aggressive thing that we go to is pornography.
And you said pseudo because it's pseudo intimacy. And the hard thing sometimes for men to admit is that we actually long for intimacy. And I believe that we long for intimacy with other men, not just with our wives, but to be known and to be in deeper relationships. So with pornography, you're able to have a certain level, a very false level of intimacy. And you don't run the risk of being rejected. When I step into a relationship with another person, I really need the gospel security to step into that relationship because I run the risk of being rejected. And so porn I think makes life completely superficial because I'm getting some sort of need met. I just don't have to actually ever be known or face rejection.
Yeah. And you create a fantasy world in your head where you become disconnected with reality. And you could ask my wife something that would define like me or our relationship, as long as she knew me dating, engaged, and married up until I confessed to her. And she would say, emotionally disconnected, don't really know what's going on. You've said this about me, like before all this, knowing me just felt kind of like disenchanted from reality and stuff. And it's like, yeah, because I was living in a fantasy world where I didn't have to deal with problems. And so when problems came in the real world, it's like, well, I don't want to or know what to do with this. And so I'm going to just avoid it and run from it or do whatever I have to do to make everyone okay around me.
Yeah. So Brad, this is going to be part one of 2 parts on pornography. And so as we're kind of wrapping up today and we're talking about shame, I would imagine even right now, people that are listening are feeling shame or maybe feeling like, man, it's time. Like I probably need to come clean. And I would say that to the listeners today. I can't tell you the amount of stories, the amount of just relational damage. And in some cases that is not being reconciled because of so much deceit and so much sin that's been covered up for so long. And sin always operates like a snowball. It gets bigger and bigger and the destruction path gets wider and larger. So for the men listening today, but also for the women listening today, and for the person that just now needs to know, what do I do? Like, 'cause it's going to take a lot of courage. That's what it takes. A lot of courage to move forward, to confess, to share. Where does someone go from here? How does the gospel help them? How does the gospel help someone receive from their spouse that this has been a struggle of theirs? And maybe I should say this to you because I said, hey, spouses, let's work with the assumption that the person in your life is struggling with this. I don't want the spouses to be like, I know you're lying because Rick and Brad said you're probably lying. I think that's going to create a lot. Like you need to be a safe place and a refuge for your spouse to come to and be able to even confess and share. And if that's not there, that needs to be talked through as well.
Totally, yeah.
But where do men and women go from here?
Yeah, that's good. Something that I didn't believe. I knew it because I learned it in seminary and I taught it in ministry. Like I knew it. I didn't believe that God saw my sin, knew about it, knew it to a depth that I wasn't even aware of. And his love for me didn't change because of it. Like Jesus went to the cross fully aware of the depth of my sin. The pornography, the hiding, the secrecy, the deception at levels that I don't even know. And he went to the cross with joy, knowing that he was going to pay for all of that. To the person who's like, I don't know where to go from here, start with knowing, not just knowing, believing that Jesus loves you right where you're at. That he's not going to love a cleaned up version of you after you confess. He's not going to love the version of you 20 years down the road that isn't looking at porn anymore. No, Jesus loves you now. And he loved you so much that he gave up his life for you. And so in that, I think there's tremendous freedom to come clean. Because again, whatever you're going to come clean about, Jesus already knows and he's not going anywhere. And so when you come clean to the people in your life, we've been talking a lot about spouses, I think for single people as well, in community is like, when you come clean to the people in your life, be it a spouse, friend, pastor, trust that they are not going to go anywhere. And I can't promise that will be the case. I can speak from experience that I've been blown away by the consistency and the people in my life who've stuck around, and have showed the love of Jesus and the commitment of Jesus. So know that you're loved by Christ and your identity is in him as a pure, holy saint, regardless of, despite your sin. And so that gives us freedom. And then in that freedom, I would encourage, challenge, plead, implore, just come clean. And don't do the half-hearted, yeah, honey, I do struggle with lust. Like let's just get it out there.
The follow-up question to that, even in discipleship, needs to be, what does that look like? Because some guys are saying that. Some people are saying that. And what that means is actually I'm looking at pornography every day.
Yeah.
You know, and for someone I'm looking at pornography once a year, you know, and so I think we need to clarify and ask those questions.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does it look like?
Yeah. We talked about this in the Stop Being Weird podcast, just about confession and the power that's in confession. So there's a bunch of stuff there that would apply to this, especially. Yeah. Come clean, be fully honest. I think a good rule of thumb for like confession is first fast and full. Confess the first sin. You know, we all have like this list of sins, and it's easy to confess the bottom tier sins. It's like, well, yeah, this one time I maybe looked at this person wrong, or, you know, it's like, no, what's the first thing on that list? The big thing. Like, let's talk about that. Fast is quickly, which, you know, if you've been struggling with pornography for a long time, like I missed the boat on that. But now here's another nudge. Do it fast. Don't wait. If you listen to this and you think, yeah, I'm going to do this, next week you won't. So do it fast. And then full, like, let's be real about what's the fullness of it. Yep. And there's going to be pain and hurt and disappointment that's going to come from knowing what is full, but it will, I think, pale in comparison to the pain and hurt and damage that will come years down the road if you don't confess fully. So just confess, come clean, be honest, bring it into the light. 1 John talks about like walking in the light. And when we walk in the light, we have fellowship with one another. So the relationships that you have, even with your spouse, like it will grow deeper when you walk in the light, and especially with something like this. It's not to say that it won't come through heartache and pain and difficult conversations that could go on for a long time. My wife and I are still having those difficult conversations, you know, and it's only been 6 months. But ultimately, fellowship, I think, comes when we walk in the light.
Yep. One last thing is speak to this, because I know we're out of time. When you share with your spouse, it's possibly and most likely going to crush them and hurt them. What would you say, and how does the gospel speak to the spouse who's on the receiving end of hearing something like that?
Yeah. In the same way that the spouse who's confessing their identity is in Christ, so is yours. You are not loved by God based on how good of a husband you have, or how good of a wife you have, or how good of a husband or wife you are. But you're loved based on Jesus' work on the cross for you. And your spouse who has sinned against you and is now telling you that was never meant to satisfy your needs and longings for intimacy and purpose and fulfillment and those kinds of things. So in a way, receiving a confession of sin from your spouse can be a way to help you remember that your ultimate satisfaction is in Christ, not your husband, not your wife. That's like a tough pill to swallow, but it's a good one. Also, like a sympathetic thing. I'm really thankful for the way my wife responded. She said one time in this, like, the pornography for me began long before I even knew Jenna. So she said, I know that this isn't about me, but it does affect me.
That's helpful.
Yeah. And so to the spouse, it's like that say it's a husband confessing to a spouse, years long porn addiction. It started before he knew you. So odds are pretty good that it has nothing to do with any dissatisfaction in you. We'll talk next time about the way our brains work and how this becomes an addiction and those kinds of things. And so there will be more clarity there. But so it affects you. Don't say, okay, well, if it's not about me, so then I can't be hurt by it. No.
Yeah,
it affects you.
Yeah. Because you're not saying, hey, let's minimize it. Like, your husband didn't set out on a path to be like, how can I harm and hurt my wife and cause pain to her? But regardless, it still did.
Correct.
But the other side of that is that you could tend to feel like maybe there's something I did wrong, or maybe like I'm not, helping my husband in this area. Maybe I'm not doing something the right way or good enough.
Right. Yeah.
And the gospel for you is
that you weren't meant to be enough for him.
Yeah.
Even for him, like, you have to trust that Jesus is his satisfaction. That you can't satisfy him in a way that only Jesus can. And so
it's good.
Yeah. So there's freedom when both of your identities are in Christ to deal with this kind of stuff.
Awesome. Let's wrap it up there today, but can you give us just a quick kind of, I guess, let us know what we're in for pornography part 2.
Yeah. I would like to talk a little bit about the brain, and I am no neuroscientist, but I think there's some really interesting stuff about how our brains work. They're really awesome in the way that God made us, but then also contribute to addiction and how pornography becomes a habitual thing that basically everyone I know wants to stop but can't. And so how does that work in our brains? So then I'd also love to talk about some practical steps after confession of like, how do we actually start to work at getting rid of this sin in our life through some practical tips and things. So.
Awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in today on Saints in Society. We're thankful that you guys were able to listen in and hear part 1 on pornography. Please stay tuned to part 2, as Brad said. And just as an encouragement, remember that as Brad said, you are a child of God. And because of that, my encouragement would be that you step forward into the light. But if you're like, man, I don't even know where to go with that or who to do that with, I would encourage you to find a pastor at your local church or contact either myself or Brad. And we would love to talk with you, walk with you, and work through this with you. And so that's a genuine offer. We're making ourselves available. So please stay tuned for next session. And yeah, I appreciate you guys tuning in.